I get a lot of comments and I don't know what to do with them because I want to make sure that I interact with you guys who watch these videos every day, who I'm so appreciative of, and make sure that you're a part of this channel as me and that your opinions are heard. And, again, my videos, I post every day. I get a lot of comments. I don't really get the time to respond to a lot of comments. And what I thought was, hey, Q&A is a great way to get people involved in the show, but that's also going to be limited to people who have their notifications on, who are specifically commenting and questioning for Q&A of that week. And that's great. And that'll stay a staple of this channel. But I was thinking, hey, what's another way I can add more interaction with you guys onto this channel? And I see people do this where they do like a commentary. Those of you who watch the Philip DeFranco show, he's somebody who has his Friday show is him going back on the comments, people who either agreed with him or disagreed with him, and talking to his community based on whatever the topic was of the videos that he did that week. And I thought that was a good idea. So I'm going to try it here. I'm going to see if that works in this context. Let me know what you guys think. If you want to keep commentary as another piece to add, we're not taking away anything, to add into the rotation of videos that we already do all week, because again, I'm always looking for more ways to interact with you. And if I just leave it to responding to comments, it's not going to be able to be the interaction I want, because there's only so much I can convey through text, and I'm an admittedly terrible texter. I'm much better speaking verbally, because I think I can communicate more when I'm not just relying on words, when I'm relying on language, tone, how I am reacting to something, and visual metaphors. I think it is a better way for me to react to certain commentary. So this is what I'm going to try out for this week. Let me know what you guys think. The first set of the first comment that I'm going to be talking about comes from this video, the most important Brown season, where I talked about how important this Brown season was going to be. And there were some interesting comments. The most interesting one I saw was from KR Thunder, who said, if we're feeling the pressure, imagine how everyone in the organization feels. To put a slight positive spin on the anxiety, it's also another word for excitement. Excitement is hard for Browns fans because we've been traumatized by decades of losses. There were plenty of logic to prove that there's a lot of potential from this offseason, but we've been burned out a lot. We desperately want to hope, and a win from an underdog makes that victory much sweeter, but it also makes losses that much harder because we dare to open ourselves up to hope again. I bet ticket sales for at least the first couple of weeks will be significantly higher than in past years. Now, I think KR brings up an interesting point here where it's like, hey, this fan base has been through a lot. Whether you're old or young, you've seen a lot, right? The older fans who were around in the 80s, they saw a lot. Even the older fans who were around during the 70s, if you were around during the 60s, God bless you. But if you're watching Jim Brown, that's the last generation that really had stress-free Browns. And even then, they lost Jim Brown in the middle of his prime, right? And then if you go up through the history, and then you get the people my age, right? The people who are, young millennials, pretty much, right? Young millennials to older Gen Z people who kind of just grew up during the expansion era of the Cleveland Browns. It's really all they know when it comes to the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, I mean, it's not the same level of distraught pain, because it's not the same shocking heartbreak that losing in the AFC Championship game is, but it is just a beat down over years and years of your optimism, right? And then even the new fans, right? The young Gen Z people, or even the people who are below them, right? I call them the year 2000 kids. How about that? Even though year 2000 kids, they old enough to drink now. That's crazy. That's crazy to think about. But let's talk about the year 2000 kids, right? Who were born after 2000 and maybe they became real Browns fans or like big time Browns fans. I say you become a fan or really like understand what's going on by the time you're like 13, 14. That's when you really get into it, right? When you're younger than that, you just like football and you like the colors and stuff. Most of the time. But like once you're 13, 14, that's when you're cognitively there enough to be like, yeah, this is what we gonna do and we gonna get this guy in free agency. The takes aren't great. I hear from 14-year-olds all the time on this channel. Some of y'all got bad takes. A lot of y'all got bad takes, but that's just, I had terrible takes when I was 14, dog. Like ain't no shame in that. But yeah, even those kids, right? We're talking about like 2014. Right. So that was the Johnny Manziel year. They had that disappointment. 2018, 2019, 20. So like no matter what age of Browns fan you are, it is this toxic thing to where we all have disappointment to relate to across all three of the generations. And I say this a lot. Whenever you have anything to relate to, you're going to cling on to that, even if it's toxic. Right. And the thing that we have to relate to is misery. So we all cling on to that, and that's not necessarily the most healthy thing that we do. That being said, like you have to understand why that happens and that it's not like an individual choice on why we do this and that it's much bigger than that. But, you know, I also think that there is room for hope in those situations, quite frankly, because if you go into every situation in life with the mindset that it's not worth getting my hopes up because I might lose, you'll never win. And I'm not saying like, oh, you got to gamble everything because you like, I'm not trying to be toxic with that, like where it's the positivity just for positivity's sake. But I would say like you have to go in with the hope of no matter what you're doing, if you're involved in it, if you're going to involve yourself in it, that you got to be able to come out on top. Because what's the point of doing it if you don't think you can win, right? And at that first sign of trouble, you're just gonna fold and say, "Oh no, it stinks again." Like, you ever play Madden with somebody like that? Like, this is a weird example, but you ever play Madden with somebody like that? You score like a touchdown on them, and it's like kind of fluke, and they throw the controller, throw a temper tantrum, and quit. Those are the worst people to be around sometimes because it's like, come on, man, like have more resolve than that. And I think there's a difference between being blindly optimistic and having resolve. And that's what I like to promote is the resolve, the mental resolve. It's like, yeah, sure, but I'm not going to let that change my process because I know my process is good. I'm going to continue to be optimistic because, you know, what's the point of watching a football team if I don't believe they can be good? If I think they'll never be good, there's no point in watching the team, you know, because you'll never derive any joy from it because anything they do good, you won't believe in. So that's kind of my philosophy with it. Let me know what y'all think. The next video I want to take comments from is what's the biggest need of the Browns this offseason. This was a Q&A video, ironically enough. There were some interesting comments on here. Chris D says, after watching these playoff games so far, a lot, we are nowhere near these other teams. No D tackles compared to every team in the league. In the playoffs, our wide receivers are by far the worst group. We need serious speed. I always caution fans from doing this, right? Which is when you watch other teams in the playoffs and it's a good game, stop comparing it to your team because it's not a good comp. One, you're only going to remember at that point of the season what your team doesn't do well, and you're going to exaggerate the things that your team doesn't do well because you're not in the playoffs, right? Especially when your team doesn't make the playoffs. Because remember when the Browns did make the playoffs and we almost beat the Chiefs? We were talking like, oh, we would have beat the Bills, man. Like, you know, it works that way. When you make the playoffs, you feel like you could be anybody. But when you don't, you feel like everybody's so far ahead of you. The truth is that, you know, the Bengals were in the AFC Championship game, and how the Browns beat the Bengals, much more impressive than how the Chiefs beat them. You know what I mean? We're not that far away. It's never as far as you think. Think about Jacksonville, right? I bet they felt far as hell away from being in the second round of the playoffs last year. And they made it to the second round of the playoffs this year. And really all they changed was their coach. Small changes, make big differences in the NFL. And in the NFL, you're never as far away as you think. So don't fall into that trap. Big Tar says, I kind of disagree. I think people keep saying get a speed guy. And this is referring to me saying that I don't think the speed guy is the biggest need. People keep saying that we need a speed guy. We need a little bit of explosion. I know we had our struggles in the red zone, but we got two guys in mind who should be able to be good, throw it up, and jump red zone threats, and then Njoku and Peoples-Jones. And 6'3" should be one of those guys. I don't think we need the speed wide receiver. Room needs some explosion, though, and I don't think we need to prioritize getting one. But if you can add explosion to the offense, the 4 teams in the conference championship had an explosive receiver. I would argue that that's not true. Like, the Chiefs don't have an explosive receiver. They don't really have anything much different than the Cleveland Browns do. Obviously, they have Travis Kelce. He's much better than David Njoku, and that makes a difference. But, like, we're not talking about Travis Kelce as, like, an explosion guy. He's just really good at being a tight end. You know, you could win multiple different ways in the NFL. I think there are some things that need to be good. Defensive lines need to be good. If you look at every team in the AFC champion and the NFC championship game, those teams had good defensive lines. But when it comes to getting the ball in the red zone, there are different ways to do it. Some teams are going to be more explosive than others. But when I look at the Browns, I say wide receiver is not the biggest issue this team has. They need to fix the things along the trenches, and if they do, I think they'll be fine. They also need to figure out what's going to be their finisher, right? When they get to these drives, what's going to be their finisher? They figured it out in the first half of last year. They need to figure out for when Deshaun Watson's out there. This next video I did was why I would not sleep on the Browns. Let's read some of the comments from this video. This one from Corey Johnson. I need to hear some positivity. I know it may be ignorant / worthless, but I have to stay positive about this team because I love my Browns. We are not that far off. We split with Baltimore and could have easily swept. We beat the brakes off of Cincy one game. We split with them. We split with the Steelers. I know we always say it, especially the past few years, but we're right there, man. Yeah, that's the pain and the torture of being where the Browns have been the last couple of years, which is mediocre, right? They're not a bad team. They're not a good team. They've been mediocre, like middle of the pack, sometimes above, sometimes below. They could beat anybody, could lose to anybody. That's the pain of it, because most of the reasons why you aren't a good team is because of things that you did to yourself. So yeah, that's just the pain of being a mediocre team. Hopefully with some adjustments, they can make that jump, but it's a hard jump to make. Danny Trebellion says, I was 4, barely 5 in 1999. Thank you for making us all feel old. Q. Hey, man, Joe Thomas making the Hall of Fame makes me feel old. So if that's going to be secondhand, somebody feeling old. Feel old because I feel old, and you feel old because I'm not that old. That makes sense, right? Browns underappreciated players. Some of the comments I thought were interesting here was one from Stomping Peak. He says, I think David could be special like Kelce or Kittle, but he has to do it. His biggest issue has historically been health and being available along the early brick hands. Baker was throwing like 90-mile-per-hour fastballs. Yeah, David has these like occasional spurts of still not being able to catch the football consistently. Those spurts don't really happen as much. I think he had like in the last 3 years, it's really only happened like 1 or 2 times. So it's not like that big of a deal with him anymore. And I do think that people make it out to be a bigger deal than it is. Like, I think people kind of point out to the couple of passes that he dropped in that like -30 game. And it's like, it's -30 degrees, man. You ever try to catch football in like -30? It's like catching a brick going like 80 miles per hour. Like it's hard as hell. So like I could have some level of leniency on drops in those situations. Hell, Amari Cooper was dropping the ball in that game. But it's far, like I'm very happy with David Njoku has done. And that's why I think he's underappreciated. The next one I have is this free agency preview. There's going to be another part to this video that's going to go up this weekend with Corey Kinnon, but this is the free agency part. We're going to do a draft part also. But the comments here were interesting. Just watch some Tyler Scott film. This is a guy that Corey likes a lot. Looks like he has that slant to the house kind of speed, immediate upgrade over Schwartz. The thing that I found was most interesting with that conversation with Corey was the conversation about speed and how awful the combine is at telling you how fast a player is in football. And I think this is going to be a video I'm going to do for both the Worst Take channel and the Untitled Unfiltered channel once we get to combine season, because it is uncanny how terrible. Like, if you look at every drill that they do in the combine, it needs to be changed. Like, I think it's a standardized test that doesn't make sense anymore, with how technology has gone. And I think we need to change it up a little bit. You know what I mean? In a world that has evolved past standardized testing, we continue to standardize test NFL players. It doesn't make sense to me. Gerard Proper says Byron Young, D tackle from Bama, will be there in the third. Oh, he has the whole draft selected. Pick 42 is going to be Tyler Scott. Then they're going to take Byron Young, as he said, 99, and get DeForest Buckner from the Colts on a 2-year, $20 million, $9 million guarantee contract. Boy, I hope so. If we can get that, I would feel great. But that's going to be it for the commentary of this week. Let me know what you think of this concept in general. Is this something that you want to continue to see happen? Do you think this is a good way to get your voices heard on the show? Do you have any small tweaks or critiques that you want to offer in the comment section below? Let me know. But I want to thank you guys for watching. Y'all have a great day. Have a better night.